As we approach the conclusion of our journey through the night of the unsheltered homeless, I'm left with several unanswered questions. In our remaining time together, I want to address some of those questions, and in the hope of jump-starting a broader community conversation, I want to include some people sharing their perspectives on homelessness and homeless policy in Spokane. First question, what's changed about homelessness in recent years? Homeless service providers are near unanimous in the opinion that the number of homeless in Spokane has noticeably increased. But they're also seeing other changes among the homeless.
I would say the other thing that has changed, and I talked to many of the people who've been at this for years and years down here, they say the average homeless person who was an alcoholic and he stood on the corner and he could drink his way into being 70 years old, that homeless guy is kind of gone now. And what there is a lot younger, a lot angrier, a lot more violent, anti-authoritarian, and a lot more addicted to opioids. It's a different population now.
Given the growing and changing nature of homelessness in our city, what's been our city's response to homelessness? What you and I might call a homeless policy.
If you were to ask me what our homeless response is, I would say I don't think we have a homeless response, and that's the problem. I don't think we have a unified system, that the kind of thing that you might develop to really go after a problem you were seriously concerned about addressing. We stay stuck in a debate over whether to do anything or whether services actually cause homelessness. You know, a lot of sort of bad ideas still drive our politics and keep us in lockstep. So I think there are individual things that have been really successful and done well. I think the permanent housing has put people into housing. The Catholic Charities Havens projects is permanent housing. I think those have been good for what they do. They're obviously not taking care of the whole problem. You know, I think Catholic Charities has done other good things, as have many other organizations that have done individual efforts, run shelters. But I think that we don't have a single system, and there's such a resistance to doing more, to doing enough, to sort of match the scale of the problem, that we're really just trapped. You know, the irony is we're going through a political campaign right now where what I think of as the anti-homeless candidates are saying what they said last time and what they said the previous time and what they said the time before that, which is we can't keep doing the same thing. Well, we're not really doing the thing. We're stuck where we've been for years and years now while that street population has grown.
If our city's response isn't matching the scale of the problem, why don't we as a city do more?
Well, I wish I had a clearer answer to why we hadn't, but I think a huge part of it is that people don't think we should do something, that if we do something that we are enabling the problem. This is a very common thing that I hear from people who tend to just respond to homelessness as an issue of blight and quality of life, as an issue that affects them, not that affects the people on the street. And I think that there's a very powerful pull to believe that people should get what they deserve.
And now cities, we're grasping with that problem and that challenge, and that's where you see a real disconnect, where you hear people, whether they're advocates for people who are suffering or they're people who are businesses and neighborhoods who are upset that their parks or sidewalks have been taken over. They're like, come on, city, do something. The city just doesn't have an infrastructure. We've got fire and police, and we've got garbage pickup and water delivery. We've got all those services figured out, and we know how to pay for them. We don't know how to pay for homeless services or even housing yet.
I think to do it right, we do need to spend more. I'm always happy to see when we get grant funding, money from the feds, because that eliminates the political obstacle for people at City Hall. If you're spending money that comes from the feds and you're David Condon or Nadine Woodward, it's a much more easy thing to get done than if you're asking them to support spending city money. So I'm always grateful to see that.
It would be wrong to suggest that all of the city of Spokane's efforts to address regional homelessness aren't working. Some things are working.
Well, the city, in the time that I've been on council, which is a little over 5 years, has now started to have shelters for some people. And so I would say that it's working for some people. We've evolved away from temporary cold weather shelters, sometimes just a space on a gym floor, to actually 24/7 low barrier shelters, even co-ed shelters, even shelters with, you can bring your animal who's your companion, so you don't have to choose between your companion and getting out of the weather. So we are doing that now. It's just that the scale is so small compared to the need. And so we are doing some good things, and we're now starting to think about regional partnerships that have just begun. I mean, the regional partnerships, we're getting some money from the county for some things, but really all the services are in the city of Spokane, and homelessness is a countywide problem. We are breaking new ground. The challenge is, in order to make a real difference, you have to scale it up. But we are. I mean, you just look back a few years ago, we did not have a year-round Cannon Street shelter. We didn't have that. That is now year-round, even with an administration that was against low barrier shelter. That is now a year-round. We're just about to open the Way Out Bridge shelter housing with wraparound services and where people can stay for 90 days, not just night by night, with services, getting them into housing. We have a new Hope House that massively increased the number of women that are served, again with wraparound services and great rehousing. It's full every night, even though we just totally expanded it, which we'll tell you. We've increased the Family Promise is now bigger. We have a new young adult shelter that's going online. Crosswalk is going to be expanded. So we are doing more things. There are more innovative things. The challenge is, it feels like, compared to that problem, a drop in the bucket. The point that I would like to make is that where we're moving towards is homelessness being a public health issue and us having to address it. Just like the fire department, if someone calls 911 with a medical emergency, they respond. They don't say, you know what, we only have so much money in our fire budget this year, so we're going to only go to every third call. They respond. And what local governments are realizing is that we're going to have to treat homelessness that way. And the reason is not just for the homeless person who's at risk of dying or having health negative outcomes and then going to the hospital and costing the hospital a lot of money, but the entire community pays a price when people are homeless.
But when it comes to Spokane's homeless response, we also have to ask, what's not working?
I would say that things that are not working right now is the idea that you could collect 200 people into a shelter and it's going to be okay because we're housing and feeding them and the behaviors will be fine. Well, that's not true if the population is angrier, younger, more anti-authoritarian, and more drug addicted. Right? So now smaller pockets of 20 to 30 maybe is a better strategy than trying to get 250 of them at one location, all crammed together in one neighborhood in one location. The other thing is, and this has just sort of always been Spokane's reoccurring problem, which I've never fully understood, it always feels like every time the end of October rolls around, all the powers that be suddenly get surprised that it's cold outside and people are on the streets. We always know it's going to be cold, and we always know this is going to be the problem. And it always has felt like to me the last 30 days from mid-October to mid-November, we're scrambling trying to meet that need. When we always know that need's coming every year. It hasn't changed, it always is. And then we stretch it out from whether it lasts till March or lasts till April. So just simply saving lives and putting people in shelters where they won't be dying in our alleys and in our streets seems to be this reoccurring surprise problem every year.
It's time for us as a community to take a step back and to ask ourselves, what is the proper role of law enforcement and the courts in addressing homelessness?
A lot of downtown property owners seem to see the proper role of the police as to do what they ask them to do. I've engaged with some of them who have reached out to me to say, I mentioned earlier, if I peed on the wall in Coeur d'Alene, I'd be in jail. Or let me tell you what I saw on my doorstep today. There was a drug addict out there openly using heroin, and he had junk around him. And when one of my employees asked him to move, he was rude to her. And so that's frustrating. I get that that's frustrating, but the person who thinks the police are going to fix that, now maybe the police could move that guy. He's on private property, he might be trespassing. unless he's sitting on the sidewalk, maybe he's on the, there are things that the police could do, but there's very little really that the police could do to achieve what he wants to achieve, which is to make that person not be there. Even if we could take people to jail for that, we have an overcrowded jail right now that we're going into debt dealing with all these misdemeanor crimes that are mostly people going in and out, in and out, in and out. And even if we were putting people in jail for graffiti, for trespassing, for drug possession, they wouldn't be in there forever. And they come out with their ability to get out of homelessness, if they're interested in that, damaged, worse than before. Now they've got to go to court, to get back and forth to court. Now they're going to have financial obligations that they probably can't pay. Their ability to get a job is hampered. All of that. The idea that the police are a solution is a fantasy, but it is a deeply held one. But mostly my concern with the police, with looking to the police to deal with homelessness, is that it won't work. It will continue the suffering of people. It will continue to throw our resources down a hole. It will not do anything to help people get off the streets. It will just move them to another street if at the end of the day we don't have any place for them to go. And that's the baseline. We don't have any place for them to go. And some are hard to help, but not all of them. Not all of those several thousand people want to sleep under the viaduct, and we're not giving them anywhere to go.
Is this us? Does our city's current response to homelessness truly reflect who we are and who we want to be as a community? And when do we as a community get to express our views on such things as a lack of adequate shelter beds, or mental health resources, or PTSD veterans living under bridges, or the homeless having nowhere to go to spend the day or access services?
Wow. What's interesting to me is, because I'm a pastor, I sit with groups of other church leaders, and I'm in a group right now sponsored by Whitworth that sits with other pastors discussing how could we unite together and use our resources of people, time, and money to help a major social problem in the city. And they wonder what to do. And in the meantime, I'm in another meeting where the mayor is speaking actually in our church for a different event that was a women's panel event, and she's saying, you know who's not showing up to deal with these problems? It's the faith community. Where's the faith community? I would love to talk to the faith community, she said. And meanwhile, the business community is having a hard time talking to the frontline workers. And what's interesting, when I talk to everybody, we all agree what the answer is. We all agree that the answer is not people living in destitution and poverty and filth and stuff on our streets in the cold, leaving needles and human waste. We all don't want that. We think what we want is people living in safe, clean shelters, managed and decent homes, getting their life back together and becoming a contributing member of society and not staying an addict. I don't care whether you're left or right. I don't care if you're a businessman or you're a social worker. We all agree that that's the goal. What we can't seem to do is sit down with each other and talk about how to achieve that goal because we climb the mountain from different sides.
Is there a better path forward, better than the one we've seen and pursued up to this point? And how do we build a community vision that's bigger than ourselves and our particular agenda? A vision that's at least as big as the problem we're trying to solve? I believe there is a better path forward. I call it the better path of Shalom.
Yeah, working together to build Shalom, and Shalom being peace is what the literal translation is, but it's actually got multiple meanings of well-being, wholeness, completeness, happiness, joy, everything works right. We're trying to get to Shalom. And for us who come out of a Christian background, I would even say Jewish background, because most of our Shalom understanding is Old Testament, is that we would see it as, if you look back at when God was building that society, how many times the phrase the widow, the orphan, and the foreigner occur. How the Old Testament societies dealt with their widow, their foreigner, and the orphan. The three lowest level, most impoverished classes of people in society was how God judged that society. Whether it was right or whether it was wicked, whether it was fair and just or not. How did you treat the widow, the orphan, and the foreigner? And I think we're kind of there in modern era, sort of looking to that model of if God's judging us by that, how should we get to shalom?
Shalom is an ancient Hebrew word with several meanings, depending on the context, including peace, welfare, healing, and restoration. In other words, shalom describes the way things ought to be, not only for our homeless friends, but also for our community as a whole. Unfortunately, what we've witnessed on this journey through unsheltered homelessness is widespread evidence of broken shalom. If genuine shalom is the way things ought to be, then our lack of adequate or appropriate shelter beds, or allowing law enforcement to play whack-a-mole with the street homeless, represents broken shalom, the way things ought not to be. Genuine shalom is about building right relationships, rooted in peace and well-being for everyone involved, that enable individuals and communities to thrive and to restore their lives to the way things ought to be.
The idea of shalom, I of course love. I went to Whitworth University, and I tell people, even though Whitworth is considered a little bit conservative, theological, that I was from the Sermon on the Mount cohort of Whitworth students, which was, we are here on this earth to make a difference and resolve conflict and demonstrate our Creator's affection and care for people by demonstrating compassion to people and empathy to people. It doesn't matter who they are politically, economically, it's how do we bring people together. And that was my cause when I went to Whitworth, and probably one reason I chose it throughout those years. And now it's been, I graduated in 1985, so it's been a long time, and I continue to do that work, and I'm attracted to other people who do that work. And I really see that's the only way forward, is to bring people together and try not to stoke the fires of conflict, but find common ground and compassion and empathy.
At the end of the day, we all get what we choose to pursue, and we all get to live with what our choices create. That's true of us as individuals, and it's as true for Spokane as a community as it is for every other community across America that's experiencing out-of-control homelessness. The present state of homelessness in Spokane represents the end product of what we as a community have chosen to pursue and create. It's impossible to choose chaos and to get cosmos, order, as a result. If we don't want to see people experiencing homelessness living in parks, under bridges, and in homeless camps, and being swept by law enforcement, then we as a community must make better choices. People experiencing homelessness live the way they do partly because we as a community have failed to provide them with reasonable, adequate, and appropriate alternatives. If our community homeless policy is broken, the fault is ours. To heal and restore the broken shalom of our homeless friends, as well as for our larger community, we need creative, innovative, and broad-based community solutions for a homeless policy built on a foundation of shalom. Anything less will doom us to failure and to having these same tired, worn-out discussions for years to come. How do I know? Because I've been doing this for 15 years, and very little has changed when compared with the size of the problem. And perhaps the reason so little has changed is because most of our solutions to homelessness reflect our understanding of poverty, the headwaters of the river of homelessness that flows through our community. Our community homeless policy is broken because our understanding of poverty is broken.
So I went to school and I studied development and justice, got a graduate degree. And in the process of doing that, I studied, poverty and homelessness and shalom and where it comes from. And the thing that just blew me away is how we misdefine poverty. We think of poverty as the absence of material resources. It's defined that way functionally in all of our programs. And even, ask anybody and they'll tell you, oh, it's not having money, or it's not having money and stuff. You can look at, I can't remember, if you go online and search for videos, you can find all sorts of videos talking about poverty being the absence of stuff and money to buy stuff. But poverty is not primarily about the absence of material resources. So the assumption that we've made that it is about the absence of material resources, we've replaced the resources, but that's a symptom. It hasn't solved the problem. Just like with somebody who's homeless, someone experiencing homelessness, like you think that the problem is not having a home, but not having a home is a symptom of a deeper issue, and you have to look past the obvious symptoms to be able to deal with the root causes. And a comprehensive or more robust definition of poverty is the absence of shalom, characterized by broken and unjust relationships.
If poverty and homelessness are about more than material resources provided as transactions, then our community solutions to homelessness cannot be a never-ending stream of transactions. You need housing, we'll give you housing. You need food, we'll give you food. You need clothes, we'll provide you with clothes. And our list of transactional solutions goes on and on, year after year. Any community solution to homelessness must also be relational. Yes, there are transactional issues to be addressed, things such as food, clothing, housing, employment. But we must also address relational root issues by affirming the intrinsic worth of the person, helping them to rebuild lost community and to restore broken shalom.
I think if you want to build a community defined by shalom, the foundation isn't how you treat people, but how you treat people is determined by how you see people. And if you recognize everybody has a story and every person has intrinsic value, it will change how you engage with them. It changes whether you see them as people or not. And I know that sounds crass and hard, but the bottom line is we dismiss people, which diminishes the value that we have for them, and then it justifies how we treat people.
As our journey through the night of the unsheltered homeless comes to an end, I want to challenge our vision moving forward. While Spokane debates the need for more shelter space, Mobile Loaves and Fishes, a faith-based nonprofit in Austin, Texas, is developing a 178-acre community for those emerging from chronic homelessness. Community First Village is helping formerly homeless individuals to rebuild community and to restore broken shalom. They believe that the single greatest cause of homelessness is the catastrophic loss of family or community. Founded in 2015, it began as a 27-acre planned community complete with a 100-space RV park, 130 microhomes, laundry, restroom, and shower facilities, a thriving community center, community kitchens, job training, employment opportunities, and much more. In April of 2021, Mobile Loaves and Fishes announced a major expansion to 178 acres, making space for an additional 1,400 microhomes, along with additional community amenities. They hope to be an example for other communities, like Spokane. You'll find more information about this amazing project on our documentary website at myroadleadshome.org. You owe it to yourself to take a look and embrace a bigger vision for how we as a community could address chronic homelessness. Maybe it's time to think about how we can rebuild lost community and restore the broken shalom of those experiencing homelessness. Why? Because as we rebuild their community, we rebuild our community. And as we restore their shalom, we restore our own shalom.